dancing up here, and every once in a while she does the head bob of her dad. Well, I'll get it in a minute. So yeah, today I'm going to do something that I've not done, and it's different, and it makes me nervous because, I'm used to just preaching. But after last summer, you are aware that the world kind of went into chaos with the George Floyd murder, and then there was the city on fire and the protests and everything. And something changed. I knew something changed because I remember one day I went to Quick Trip, and there was a young black man at the register, and I felt different. I felt like somehow I have to like prove to him I'm not a racist. How do you prove to a guy you're not a racist when all you're doing is buying donuts? It was, and there were all these feelings. And then our district superintendent, who has several Haitian adopted daughters from Haiti, he was encouraging us to do what we could to heal our world. And then Tammy Hill sent me a video, and the video was called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man by Emmanuel Ochoa. And I watched several of these videos, and they were uncomfortable conversations with a black man. And so then Tammy and I talked on the phone, and I asked her this question, and it was uncomfortable. I said, well, do you prefer to be called African American or black? I mean, I don't even know the right words. And even standing here, I'm afraid I will say something wrong. But Theodore Roosevelt said this: in any moment of decision, the right thing to do or the best thing to do is make the right choice. I know. Well, he was pretty brilliant. The best thing to do is make the right choice. The next best thing to do is make the wrong choice. The worst thing to do is nothing. And I feel like if the church doesn't begin to heal the world, if we don't address these issues, today we're going to talk about race because, as you may have noticed, Tammy and I are not the same color. Our hair is different too. But if the church doesn't, remember, the church is the pillar and foundation of the truth. And if the church doesn't address things, then all we have is Fox, CNN, MSNBC, and TikTok. And I would rather the church have their go. And so, without belaboring this any longer, would you please welcome Tammy Hill? She's more nervous than me, by the way. I like the background music. It's like Star Wars. Is that me or her? Or? Oh, okay. Thank you, Doug. Do we need to back up more? Okay. Can you back up just a... Can we be together? Of course we can. No, we like each other. So we started then having phone. I don't know what. Yeah. Poor Pat. Okay, I guess we'll just give it a whirl. If not, I have a sermon tucked in my pocket. So not literally. So one of the things that we started doing is we started having weekly phone calls, and then we would talk with her mom, her sister, because somehow you did a conference call, and we talked a lot, and I learned a lot. I really did, and I thought, okay, in fact, one of the things that most impacted me, because you're trying to sort through it, and all you really have is your own life experiences, and one of the videos that her sister sent to me to watch, her sister lives in Seattle, and I don't remember the name of the video, but they had like a man on the street, sort of like Jay Leno used to go out, And they would go up to people and they would ask this question: how old were you when you learned that your race mattered? And I'm like, I don't know. How old? I don't know. Does my race matter? And they would interview white people, and that would kind of be their response, like, well, my race doesn't matter. And then they would interview black people, and they would say things like, well, when I was in kindergarten, I sat down at a table, and some of the kids got up and left. And I went home and asked my mom why. And I was like, okay, that's a life experience that I've never had. So how old were you when you learned that your race mattered?
I'm thinking like maybe 7 or 8.
What happened?
It was probably in school too, where, just like, if I went to Minneapolis schools, and that had, I don't know, Minneapolis in that time, because I'm old, it had, more black kids, in the area than in the area we're in right now. But it was more mixed and everything, and so that there was a definite like distinction, between the black kids and the white kids. It was just, I don't know, as if they had almost segregated themselves or whatever, and you could tell with the teachers and different things like that, just based on how they treated you.
And one of the stories I told her, and I'm going to tell you, but it doesn't take a lot of things to affect you. I mean, it really doesn't take a lot. When I was in 2nd grade, I've been overweight my whole life. I know I need to work on it, but and I was in over lunch break, and I had a question on my homework, and my teacher had left the room, so I got up to go find my teacher. And she was down at the end of the hall talking to another teacher, and it was my favorite day of the school year where they weigh you. And yeah, you guys didn't get weighed in school? Oh yeah, no, well, it's a Wisconsin thing apparently. And as I'm walking down the hall, my teacher says, oh, I have one kid who's probably gonna break the scale. Oh, here he is now. And it was just one, comment, but it affects. I mean, it's, and so I can see how it doesn't take, it's not like daily repeated, it's just, you just learn, okay, I'm different. One of the stories that you told me was about your daughter, Alexa, so would you tell us that story?
When we had gone out with friends, it was, my husband's like, what? We were hanging out with friends, and she was little at the time. She was maybe like 2 or 3, maybe 4. She was just little. And I said, oh, my daughter is such a tall little girl and stuff. And I said, I'm afraid that when she gets older, she won't, have anybody to like date, because they'll be like, she'll like be taller than everybody. And it's just like a little silly thing. And the girl I was with said, oh, she's like, don't even worry about it. My son is going to be tall, and they can date each other, and it'll be fine. And she really didn't, I didn't say anything to her. I was like stunned. And she didn't even give it another thought. And she didn't realize how it impacted me. But I like teared up, and I told, Mike about it. And I'm like, oh my word, she didn't even flinch. She didn't even think twice. She just said, oh, that's okay. You can date, my son. And since she was white, I was like, oh, okay. Like it was okay. Like she, and I realized that, there's so many, I mean, that just doesn't happen. It's like, ever since, me and Mike, have, been together, it's like people are like, how did you guys get together, and stuff. And so, and I knew that was going to be a factor in my kids' lives. And so you think, should you have kids, what are they going to go through? What's going to happen to them, and stuff, since you apparently, fell in love with the wrong person. So it was just, I didn't tell her, but she just didn't realize how affected I was and how grateful I was that she didn't even think twice about it. It was just as if I was just a normal human being, and she didn't even have to think about it. So.
Well, and truthfully, I've thought a lot of things about my daughter dating, but it never crossed my mind that her race would be an issue. And so when you told me the story, that she just saw you as like you said, a normal human being, and I'm like, I would like to think everyone could just be thought of as a normal human being. And I know we live in a divided world, and in the series I've been talking about the schemes of Satan. I mean, division is what he wants. He wants us to hate. He does. He wants us to destroy and steal and to kill, because that's what he does. And when we do it to each other. So how has being, and this is kind of it's an awkward question. Well, that's why, in fact, we've called this an uncomfortable conversation. We were going to call it an uncomfortable conversation with a black woman, but I didn't want Emmanuel Ochoa to get mad. So, because he was the next football player and he would beat me up. He wouldn't even care, I guess. Well, he's huge. Do any of you know Emmanuel Ochoa? Okay, well, you can Google Emmanuel Ochoa. I would not want to, So here's an uncomfortable question. How has being black influenced your everyday life?
Every day is kind of a hard one. I mean, it's like an every once in a while. I think more. I mean, obviously, I've gotten used to it.
You've had some practice.
And but like I mentioned, I'm assuming that most people, just casually say, "Oh, how did you meet your spouse or everything?" But when it's like Mike and I, they're like, like how did you guys meet? And it's like, oh, well, I came from. I said this to you. I'm like, oh, I came from planet X, and he came from planet Y, and then we just bumped into each other. But honestly, it was just, again, normal, but people see it as odd. So I think it's just on a daily basis, you're just trying to be yourself and see how people take you, basically. I work in healthcare, and I sit at the front desk, and I get, a lot of different aspects of people, and how they, when they're, some of them are very uncomfortable when they see me. They never know, working with people. They're sometimes uncomfortable. They don't know what to expect, as if I'm going to be different than any other coworker. And so it's just kind of like just a daily thing, is just kind of gauging, what's going to happen that day, if it's going to be fine, or if it's going to be, something different. One of the things we had talked about was when we live in Waconia, and I remember, going on like house tours, and Mike and I looked all over the city and everything, at different homes to try and buy when we were about to get married. And And then, the realtor brought us out to Waconia, and I had no clue where we were going. And we came out there, and I was like, are you serious? And I looked at Mike, and I'm like, I know that you don't think about this, hon. I said, did you forget you married a black girl? And stuff. And he's like, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to be like the only person. And we moved there in 2000, and there was one black lady in Waconia. And we were moving into our house, and we were putting in rock and sod and everything. And we had a friend that came over, and she was helping out Mike, and then I came up and to the house and to help and everything, and the man was like, what's that colored girl doing here? And I was like, oh, okay. And Mike's like, well, that's my wife. But he didn't say it that nicely. He was a little irritated. And then, when we would get out of the car together, there was a man, and he just glared at us, and he's like, oh my gosh, what's this world coming to? And everything. And I'm like, oh, okay. Just one day at a time, push through it. It's okay. We'll get through and stuff. So, it's every day. It's a whatever waves, whatever comes up.
As we've talked, though, I realize we all have things to think about. We do. We all carry stuff. But I don't think about, I've never gone to a job interview and had the thought, I wonder if my race, even if it doesn't, the thought, I wonder if my race will negatively affect what's going to happen. Since I heard that question, how old were you when you first found your race mattered? I've asked a lot of people that question. And as I said, most of the white people have said, well, I don't know that it doesn't matter. I remember I asked one woman, though, she grew up in a bigger city, and she said, I was really young, and so I was very curious. She's white. I was very curious where she was going to go with this. She goes, I was really young, and I was in the car with my mom, and we pulled up to a stoplight, and then we saw some black guys, and she said, hurry, lock your door. And I thought, it's real, and it's real to varying degrees, but it's a real thing. And I wish I would have done a better job over because we've known each other for 15 years. Not quite as long as you lived in Waconia, but we've known each other quite a while. And her mother has some actually terrible stories. Can I tell your mom's stories? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Caroline, I hope I have permission, but one of our phone calls, her mom, they grew up in Mississippi, or she was born in Mississippi. Right, am I getting it right?
My grandmother was.
Okay. Yes. And then all of a sudden they moved to Pennsylvania, mm-hmm. and your mom was really disappointed that they moved to Pennsylvania because her whole life, but what she found out years later is that there were people being lynched. And it's like, that's not that, that's like not that long ago. It's kind of crazy. So I have a question that I'm going to ask that you don't know that I'm going to ask. Poor Tammy. And now my question is gone. So it must not have been a good question. Okay, well, do any of you have any questions? That is a planned thing, by the way. Oh, yes, Chris.
I want to thank you for your bravery. This is an uncomfortable conversation.
That's why we called it that.
Christians, we have to be willing to do that, right? So, thank you. And what do you need us to know? And how can we support you?
Well, that is what she's gonna. You jumped to the end already. So yeah, Chris is kind of like, okay, time's a ticking. But, well, so I've asked this question, and to be fair, and one of the things that she has taught me is that it's not a one-size-fits-all, because everyone is different, and that's true. I mean, just because I'm from Wisconsin doesn't mean I'm just like every other person from Wisconsin. Just like because, you're whatever, it doesn't mean it is a one-size-fits-all, or not. Yeah. And so there are 2 Nazarene pastors that are black in our district, and I've asked them both this question. And their answers were different. Like Lester Anderson, who pastors in Brooklyn Center, I believe, he said he's black and Hispanic. And he said, for him, he doesn't think there's ever been a better time to be a black man in America. He said, I can walk into the bank with nothing but my driver's license and come out with money. And another pastor, he's in North Dakota, he feels like, but he was also a football star. And I'm not saying that may have helped him, but it probably helped him, being somewhat popular in athletics isn't a bad thing. So it is different, but, well, okay, we'll go to the end. You tell us because that was my last question, is what advice would you give to us, or how would you encourage us to help wounds heal, or whatever the right words would be?
And when Pastor John asked this, I just said that each person that you encounter, if you can, throw out all of the group thoughts that you've been given by grandpa and grandma and aunt and uncle and whoever else influenced you, or ever said anything, or ever made little comments like the example that you gave. Try and throw that out, and rather than see people as groups, see them as individuals, because that's what you're encountering, is an individual. You are never going to find another Tammy when you go out. Just because you had this uncomfortable conversation in church, you're not going to find another me when you walk out on the street or go to the convenience store. You're going to just find whoever that person is. And that's how you have to take them. So they can be, they could be like Emmanuel Acho, and he's huge and he's intimidating and he's nice looking and, he may be dressed nice, or he could be in tattered clothes and have teeth missing. It's an individual thing. When Pastor John was talking to me, my sister, and my mom, we all had different experiences. My sister is way more aware and gets offended more, and it will just really tell you, what she thinks. Whereas I'm more subtle, and I understand ignorance, and I'm okay, I'll just chalk it up to them being ignorant at this point in time. Hopefully they'll learn something, and we'll go on from there. So, I'm just look at everybody as an individual when you meet them, just like you would look at anyone else. If you go into work and you meet a new person who just started at your company, and they're blonde hair and blue eyed, you can't I'm assuming you don't instantly think, whoa, we're going to be best friends. I don't think you would do that, and stuff. And so if they have, funny hair that isn't like yours, that they can't do anything about because that's what they were born with, and they happen to be brown skin, and everything, they might end up being your best friend, depending on your personality and their personality, and what you get, how you get along, and what your interests are. That's what I would say. Just don't just try. And it's hard because that's not the way we grew up. And, well, we were always taught this. And, I mean, I'm assuming everybody knows that their parents were broken. And their grandparents were broken. And everybody's broken. And no one is perfect. And so everything that you were taught isn't everything that's true. And so the bad stuff you got to throw out, and then just see people as who they are. Try and get to know them. You might like them. That's what I'd say.
Well, I think you did a good job being so nervous. Good job. I would also add, Tammy and her sister, they gave me titles of books and videos and things like that. And one of the books, Why Do All the Black Kids Eat Together in the Cafeteria, I think is the name of it. And there was a part in there, and it was just interesting a lot of it was interesting. Well, okay, we'll say, whatever. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but like this one story was of this black boy who was going to school. I think it was the author's son. And the white kids didn't know about races. And so one of the kids said, "So are you that color because you drink a lot of chocolate milk?" And the author's just like, "We don't know. Like, you don't know until you know. Like, how are you supposed to know if you grow up, in a white area or whatever race or whatever color, that's what you know." So I would encourage you just to, like she said, just to get to know people and not believe everything that you're hearing that's coming down, because a lot of it, I don't know if you can trust it, but so many things are meant to divide. Right now the world is more divided, it seems anyway, than ever, and we need to look for ways to unite rather than to divide. And Tammy doesn't know this either, but most of our conversations, all of our conversations, had been on the phone until Thursday night. I went over to her house, and we sat across the table. Mike was there, told us some good stories. Thank you, Mike. And it was the first time that we had face-to-face conversations. And near the end of it, we're about this close. There's a table in between us. And we were talking about what Jesus has done. That in Christ, there's neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, barbarian or Scythian, male nor female, but Christ is in all and is all. And how Paul tells us in Ephesians that he has made known to us the mystery of his will, to be put into effect when times will have reached their fulfillment, to bring all things together in heaven and on earth under one head, Christ. And I looked over at her and I said, "You are my sister." And for me, it was a powerful moment. Because, we've talked on the phone, and we both have believed in the same God, and we've gone to the same church, but just to tell her, "You're my sister." And the truth is, she's my sister in a deeper way than many of my blood relatives are, because God has brought us together. There's one loaf. That's what Paul talks about when he talks about communion. One loaf. We are one body. And so I just want to thank you. She's actually the one that brought all this on, by the way, because if she hadn't sent me uncomfortable conversations with a black man, we wouldn't be sitting here it wasn't that uncomfortable. Maybe not for me. Maybe for you guys, I'm not sure. But anyway, I just want to thank you, Tammy. I want to thank you guys for being here. And I know the worship team has a really long last song, so we're going to wrap up now. Well, I'm sorry. Well, it is long, Paul. It's longer than usual. So, oh man, I throw people under the bus left and right, and I'm not even trying.
Tammy and Mike and their precious children have been such a tremendous blessing to our church. And one of the things that just blesses me on Sunday morning is when they troop in and come to their aisle, which is like 2 aisles up from where we sit. And I always feel warm in my heart. And I thank God for so much courage. I preached for 50 years. But to sit up in front of about 50 people and talk about this, I would be scared out of my wits. So God used you and God bless you.
And I just want to add a thing that you don't know about Tammy. Tammy and her mom and Lynn pray on the phone almost every week. I mean, I know not every week, but I just love that they're praying. So I'm going to close in prayer. Father in heaven, I just thank you for being who you are, and thank you that you are the creator of all people. And thank you that from one blood you made all humans. And so I ask you to help us be about your work, Jesus. In your name we pray. Amen.